So hi, hello and welcome. Microbehunter here again. Well, some questions are a little bit more difficult to answer than others, and today I got another question here which I basically spent quite a bit of time thinking about it. I'm going to read the question first, then I'm going to give you again my opinion. Do you think that so-called professional microscope users working at a university are better than normal people who work independently at home with an old Leitz microscope? Thank you for the question. And when I first read the question, I said, oh my gosh, this question causes in my head more questions to appear than answers. What does it even mean to be better at something? Or what is what are normal people? Or does the age of the microscope, it's an old Leitz microscope, does the age of the microscope have anything to do with that? Or the brand, it's a Leitz microscope. Or the fact that the people are working independently at home. Or whether you're working at a university or not. So many questions, and I started to think about all of these aspects, and then I said, forget about this. I'm not going to go down into that rabbit hole. I'm just going to take the question as it is, and I'm going to make a little comparison between professional microscope users and amateurs. These are people who are doing that for the love of the activity, and this is a very fundamental question which is not only related to microscopy, but I would say to many activities of our daily lives. And yes, I do have a strong opinion, and the short answer is yes. With everything else being equal, I think that professional users of microscopes essentially are better in what they're doing because simply, that's what I'm going to explain. There are three reasons, okay? So before I do that, essentially a professional microscope user is someone who is using a microscope for the purpose of earning a living. They're being paid for it. And of course, someone who spends a lot of time analyzing certain biopsies, for example, these are for medical diagnosis. When you're doing this 20 years, I mean, of course, you're going to be much better than someone who is not doing that for 20 years. But then again, it depends very much on the activity itself. So what we have to do is we have to compare apples and apples and not apples with oranges, as the saying goes. Now, what are the three reasons why I think that, yes, I think that professional microscope users are better in what they're doing. And this has nothing to do with the payment that they receive. And the first reason is of course, if you're doing this professionally, then, and you're working at a university, then you have access to much better equipment and hardware that normally you would have otherwise if you're just working at home. So yes, equipment does play a role, but it depends a lot on the type of activity that you're doing, on the type of research that you're doing. And sometimes you do not need very expensive equipment, but generally equipment and hardware is very often at a research level not always so much a limiting factor. So we've kind of cleared away that aspect already, but there are other aspects as well. And the second one would be is that at the university, you have access to more information. You basically have a team that you can exchange opinions with. You have access to scientific literature. You have access to training as well. So simply the whole atmosphere is in such a way that you can develop yourself more easily. Now, this is not always necessary if you are doing an activity out of the love for it. If you just wanted to do casual nature observation, you don't always need that because you're simply enjoying that, what you're doing, and then any type of interactivity that you want to have with other people, you can do that online. But especially at research, things can go very specific very quickly, and it's good to have a certain atmosphere around you, a certain environment that is actually very supportive of research. And the third reason, I think, and that is the most important reason, is that people who are doing this for a living essentially are simply spending much more time with activity. If you're doing this for 20 years, 8 hours a day, come on, I at least hope that you're going to be better in your activity than someone who is not doing that. But again, you see, microscopy has many different areas of applications. And if your task is the analysis of biopsies, as I just mentioned before, then of course you're going to be probably better in doing that. But other people who are specialized in different things, and it doesn't matter where they're doing that for hobby or professionally, other people who are specialized in different things are probably going to be better in what they're doing there as well. So you see, you cannot really compare this, but generally, if everything's being the same in the type of activity, well, at least I hope that people who are doing a certain activity professionally and spending so much time behind it, that ultimately they become better in what they're doing. Yeah, But then as a last point I do want to say is that many important scientific discoveries have been made in the past with devices, with microscopes that were by far not as good as the equipment that we have nowadays available. So it depends very much also on the motivation that you put into your activity and on the interest that you put into the activity, and also on your own willingness to learn. Now the issue can of course even be a little bit more complex than that. Over the course of the past years I've met many different people, some of them being professional microscope users working in research, other people being hobbyists, and the motivations can be very different. And for some professional microscope users, the microscope was simply a tool that serves a higher research interest. They didn't have any personal connection to the device, were not even interested in learning much more about the microscope, but they were just using it to get their research goals forward. And then I've also met people working at universities. For them microscopes were very much of almost a passion, and people, even though they were working in research, they used the microscope as well to do observations that interested them personally, and they essentially also participated in competitions, photography competitions. So kind of they used the resources available at the university also to cover a little bit some of their hobbyists uses as well. So you see the motivations are very diverse, and I think what is important is not so much of whether you're being paid for something or whether you're just doing it for the love, because very often there is an overlap, and it would be kind of very sad that if you're spending so many hours behind a microscope for 10 years, 20 years, your whole life, and then actually not also have some kind of a personal interest in your activity. And as a last little anecdote, I did talk to a sales representative of a microscope several years ago, and I asked him, well, who actually buys microscopes for hobby purposes? Do you know anyone? So how big is the amateur community? And he says, yeah, there are actually quite a few of them. And I ask, who is that? And says, yeah, for example, recently I sold a microscope, he told me, to someone who went into retirement. And this woman was actually working as in a laboratory for many years. And as a retirement present, she bought herself an own present, a nice microscope to keep her also engaged and active during her retirement time. So you see, some people, it's very difficult to draw a line between hobbyists and amateurs. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. I wish you all the best. Happy microbe hunting as always, and see you around next time. Bye-bye.